Hello there, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'll be making this QR code generator in Cinema 4D using the Python effector. So before we start, there are a couple of things you need to prepare. Well, you need to add this Python module to the Cinema 4D Python environment so we can actually use it inside the Python supported objects. So whether it was the Python effector, the Python tag, etc. So in our case, we're using the Python effector. Let's check it out. So as you can see here, we are importing the QR code library that's going to be responsible for generating the QR code image that we'll use subsequently in the MoGraph section of the code to actually handle the clones. So basically what we're doing, we are making a function that's going to generate the QR code image and it's going to return the relevant data. So in our example, it's going to be the array of pixels and the image size. So to add the Python module to the Cinema 4D environment, you're gonna need to follow this YouTube video that I'm gonna link in the description. Basically, it shows you how to add any third-party library to the Cinema 4D environment, so you can import it in any Python supported object. So this particular setup is slightly more advanced than our actual tutorial. As you can see here, we have a lot of controls. We can change the animation speed, for example. We can also change the colors. I'm gonna provide this scene in the description. You can download it for free. I'm gonna link our Gumroad page. You can download it from there. Also, important thing to keep in mind, you're still gonna need to add the Python library, even if you want to just use the downloaded scene, because as you've seen before, we are actually importing the module. So just keep that in mind. Just follow the video, check if you can import it, and you're ready to go. Now let's jump into our new scene. Well, first of all, let's switch to the scripting layout. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll be using the Python effector. So that's gonna involve a MoGraph object. You can use either a matrix or a cloner. I'm gonna use a matrix. Let's add the Python effector. So as you may have noticed, by default, something has changed. So basically the Python effector has some basic implementation just to demonstrate how you can use the effector. And also it has two modes. So it is by default set to parameter control. Basically this controls how much each of the clones is being affected by each of these parameters. Let's switch to full control. And it also has some demonstrative code. Let's delete that to make the code much cleaner, since we're not going to need them. And let's remove the fields contribution for now. So first of all, let's import the library. So if you followed the video that I linked, you should not face any issues. So now let's create the function that's gonna generate the QR code image. Let's give it one argument. That's gonna be the text to generate the code for. So I'm not gonna dive deep into the QR code object since it's gonna make the tutorial much longer. If you're interested, you can check the documentation, but for now, just follow what I'm doing. So now that we generated the image, let's extract a binary array from the pixels. So it's gonna contain only values of ones and zeros. Now let's return the array of pixels and the image size. So basically what we're doing here, we are accessing the size of the image. So it's gonna have two values, the X and Y values. Since it's gonna be a square, we only need one of the returned values. Now let's work with the main function. So now to use the function, we need to feed it the actual text. So to do that, let's add a UI element that's gonna be the text that we're gonna generate the QR code for. Now let's add the UI element to the code. So basically OP stands for the operator that's holding the code. In our case is the Python effector. So we're accessing this UI element of this object. So we didn't get any errors, nice. Now let's add some text in the input field. And let's check if it's working. So as you can see here, we have some zeros and some ones. So this is a good sign that it's probably working. Now let's try to visualize it on the clones. So let's loop over the clones for now. But first let's access the color array so we can visualize it better. But also don't forget to apply the manipulated array so the changes are applied. Now let's try to change the colors of the clones. So basically what is happening here is that the matrix count is out of sync with the resolution of the generated image. So let's make it so that the generated resolution is gonna update the matrix count. So if we have a larger link, the count will increase and vice versa. Now let's access the generator. Now let's drag the count array. So the generator's count array is gonna be of type Cinema 4D vector of values x, y, and z. So the values of x and z are gonna be the size, and we're gonna keep the y to 1 because we don't want any clones on the height. Now let's see if it's working. So this count should change dynamically to the generated link. So let's try to make it much smaller, so 1 letter, for example. Nice. So as you can see here, we got the count accommodating to the generated link. Now let's remove the print because we're not gonna need it for now. Now let's remove the unwanted clones. And to do that, we need to access the flags array. We actually want the opposite effect, so let's change that. Now we got it working, but it's boring, right? So let's do something interesting. Now let's import the random module. And also let's add elements that are gonna hold the seeds for the randomness and the maximum random height for the clones. Now let's apply the seed from the UI to the randomness. Now let's generate an array that gives the clones a random height that does not exceed this value. Now let's loop over the pixels array and give each clone a random value. That random value is going to be between 0 and our UI element, so it's going to be this. Now let's add the generated randomness to the clones. So first let's change the height. But first let's unpack the XYZ coordinates because we're gonna need them in the offset vector since we're only gonna change the Y axis and we're gonna keep the X and Z coordinates. Now let's put the generated height in the Y axis. So as you can see here, the randomness is generated. And if we check the top, the clones should be intact since we're only working on the Y axis. Now let's animate it based on the current frame. So let's access the document's time. Let's create a variable for the max frame. So this is gonna be. And also let's create a variable for the current frame. Now let's get the current frame percentage to the max frame, so it's gonna interpolate between 0 to 1 throughout the timeline. And then we'll use this value as a multiplier to get the desired blend effect. Now let's multiply the height by the current frame percentage. So as you can see here, it's working, but it is in reverse. So we need it to settle down at the end frame. To do that, we need to simply subtract this value from 1. Now let's put the subtraction in parentheses. And it should be working as intended. Now, just for fun, let's animate the scale and the color. So, Now let's check if this scale is working. Now let's animate the color. Now let's try to add an actual link. So as you can see here, the corresponding QR code is generated. And that was it for today's video. If you learned something, please hit the subscribe button. Till the next one, peace.